name's Lauren Lamont. I am a volunteer assigned to this room today, so I'll be doing just a really brief introduction. And we're going to be hearing about some really awesome topics about Shield and Datamask. And we'll be hearing from Paul Mackinaw, the principal at LeanCog. Yeah, great. All right, thanks everyone.
Well, as you mentioned, my name is Paul Mackinaw. I'm principal and founder of LeanCog. We're a Salesforce consulting firm. But before I got involved in the Salesforce industry, way back in 2001, I was a sales engineer at VeriSign, and one of the things that we sold was managed security services. And these guys were like legit former criminal hackers. Right? They were white hat hackers, but some of them had like FBI records, CIA records, and I was a sales engineer, so we'd go pitch the services, but then we'd go have dinner, and we would hear the wildest stories about what these guys used to do. And so it left me with a really healthy sense of paranoia. And like Joseph Heller said, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you, right? So I love Shield and Datamask, and I'm going to use them in one sentence. Because they've become one to me. Oh, first, thank you to our sponsors, as always. But what I want to do to get started is I found that Shield and Datamask was very confusing when I first started looking into it. The fuzziness of Salesforce marketing didn't translate well into what I was seeing in the documentation or the products, and I had a really hard time getting my arms around it. So what I wanted to do today is take you through what the products actually are and what they do and where they might be a good fit. And to help figure out if it's going to be a good fit, I want to start with a little game of Never Have I Ever. You guys played this before? You put a hand up, 5 fingers. Every time you've done something, bring a finger down. If you put all 5 fingers down, it's probably worth staying through the rest of the presentation. If you don't, you're welcome to stay and get entertained. But, all right, so first, Never Have I Ever. Had to stop tracking history on one field to track history on another field. Anyone done that? Given someone admin access to a full or partial sandbox. Prayed that an admin or developer was going to respond professionally after some tough feedback. Learned that someone downloaded data from our org before quitting or getting fired. Saved customer PII in my org. So, personally identifiable information. Had a compliance audit. Those are fun. Known a CISO or worked for a company that has a CISO. Had to compromise an export reporting permission for a one-off use case. Been asked what pages people are visiting. Has anyone put all 5 fingers down? Can I see a show? Is this on it? Okay. Good. So these are the types of things Shield can help with, Shield and Datamask. I use it as one thing because I don't know why Datamask isn't part of Shield. It's not, but you can't have a conversation about Shield and not talk about Datamask. And the reason for that is Shield, and this is from Salesforce, they're just talking about security and protection and monitoring. It's like, well, great, that all sounds good. But then you make a full sandbox and you let an integration partner come in and take all the data and no one's monitoring it. That's why you can't not talk about Datamask. And Datamask, which we'll get into, is masking data on sandboxes. So what is Shield? Right? And so Shield is a brand name, like Einstein. It's not a single product. It is a suite of products that can be sold as the Shield package, or they can be purchased individually, sometimes, kind of, right? And so you have event monitoring, which is, I would say, the biggest piece of Shield in terms of product complexity. But it's not just event monitoring. It's event monitoring tomorrow, but also right now. And you can also manage, and you can also report, and you can also prevent. I kind of feel like event monitoring was the first name, and they never changed the name as they added more features. But that's why it's a little confusing. Platform encryption. Well, I have encrypted fields in Salesforce. What do I need platform encryption for? And what's this at-rest stuff anyway? We'll talk about that. Field Audit Trail. This one is weird because it's normally called Field History Tracking unless you pay extra for it in Shield. Now it's Field Audit Trail, but it's just Field History Tracking, but more. And then Einstein Data Detect. This changes names like every 2 years anyway, so it's hard to kind of follow. But you know, for a long time, I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to be detecting. So maybe I need to ask Einstein what to do with it. And then Datamask. This one's actually named really well. But the first three are part of Shield, but can be purchased individually. Data Detect only comes if you buy the whole suite of Shield. And Datamask is a separate license, but I would suggest you should always consider it in the same conversation. So what is event monitoring? So this one I found most confusing because event monitoring is both the product, but it is also a specific feature of the product that is distinctly different than other features of the product. So event monitoring is basically logs of many, many things you can want. So it could be logs of what pages were visited, where people logged in from, what reports were downloaded, but they're just logs. And if you look at them, they're really not very, hang on, let me find them. Here we go. They're not user-friendly. This is an example of the logs, right? So I'm logging. You can see login, log out, API usage, REST API. These are the things that I'm logging. But the actual data of the log is buried in an export at each log level. So it's very unreadable. The intention of the logs is to go into a BI tool. So when it originally came out, it was intended to go to tools like Splunk, right? But then they realized not everyone has a tool like that, and that was a hurdle to usage. So then what they did is they threw in a license for CRM analytics with an event monitoring template. This also changes names regularly, so it's hard to keep up. But event monitoring is the generation of the logs, but part of the event monitoring package includes a couple licenses to CRM analytics with event monitor templates, so you can actually see what was going on. This is a demo org, so like not much is going on, but you can see that this is how you report on it. You probably would never, as a user, go directly to the logs because they're just, you have to, if you're hunting for something, you have to download every CSV of every log and look in it. So normally you would use a tool like this. Okay, so what else does it do? Well, event monitoring is a day later. That's not real helpful when someone pulls a report on their last day. So they also have real-time monitoring, which is different than event monitoring. It's a subset, and it's a different feature, and it's configured entirely uniquely. So real-time monitoring is a subset focused on user behavior, where like login IP addresses, download reports. So there's some of the same things that are in event monitoring, but they're things that you kind of need to know right now, right? And so you can set up reporting around that as well. Then there's transaction security policies. This is very different than the rest of event monitoring because this can go all the way to blocking user behavior. Okay, so for example, I've got a little rule set up. So I just build a report for everything I'm going to need to be successful at my next company. And so I'm going to take all my leads, all my contacts, and I'm going to go to download them. Right? And I can normally download reports, but I built, using TSP, basically a prevention. I also get an email alert as the admin saying that I tried to do it, but I stopped the user from doing it. So you could say, in this case, my rule was, because I don't have a ton of data, I was like, if they try to pull more than 50 records, block them. And then that way they got to come ask me for it, right? But you could do it in a bigger org, you know, maybe they have good reason to pull and export 50, 100 records, but if it's everything in the database, that's probably bad, right? So we should stop that. The next piece is, well, I talked about it. The analytics is included. That's always a point of confusion. You get some licenses. Even if you have CRMA, this is slightly different because it's templatized. So if you know CRMA, that's great because now you can make bigger reports. If you don't, that's okay too because the template comes with stuff. So that is what event monitoring is. So it's a lot more than just monitoring. It's monitoring, it's reporting, it's prevention, things like that. And so a couple of these things that I showed live. All right, so the next product is platform encryption. So when you go into Salesforce normally, I know this is a little tiny, but you have this encrypted field. So isn't that good enough? If you need to encrypt it, you make it an encrypted field. What's platform encryption? Well, platform encryption is way more than that special field type. You can encrypt all the native fields, email fields, phone number fields, long text fields, notes and attachments. And it's what's called encrypted at rest. It's just like if the hard drive on your computer is encrypted, you're not dealing with encrypted data. You don't see it on a normal day-to-day basis. It doesn't affect your UI at all. But when it's turned off and you're logged off, if someone steals that hard drive, it's encrypted. They can't see it, right? This is the same thing. Almost always, this is driven for compliance reason. The only people that ever ask me about this are people that are under like HIPPA or SOX or something like that, because those regulatory bodies require encryption at rest. But this one isn't very exciting to many people because there's no user benefit to it, right? People are like, how do I make Salesforce more usable? How do I get more valuable out of it? This is how do I protect myself or comply with something? So it tends to be one that people don't really find very interesting until someone makes them. Field audit trails. So field audit trails are simply an extension of field history tracking. I don't know why they don't use the same name. It creates confusion, in my opinion. But what you do is basically, there's zero UI to this. So that's another point of confusion. The only way to interact with configuring field audit trail is with configurations done via API, and reporting is done through asynchronous SOQL on big objects. So it's not super user-friendly. But what it does, the one that people love, is it gives you 50 fields per object. So that constant battle, every time someone says, hey, I want to track history on this field, and I say, well, great, which one are we going to stop tracking history on? Because we're maxed out on every object, every customer, they're all the same. But you get 50. So that's the only difference you'll see, though, is when you go to hit save at 21, it doesn't give you that error that says you've maxed out.
So you're saying you can't run the native history report?
You can, but that is just like the normal native history. That only goes for, you have to configure it for 18 to 24 months. With field audit trail, you can go 10 years. Okay, but to get the data past that native portion, you have to use the it moves it to a big object. So it does behave just like field history tracking until the end of its duration, and you get the extra fields. But to configure that duration, you have to use the API. And then to report on big objects, you have to build your own asynchronous SOQL query against big objects. So if you got to go back 4 years, you know, there's a lot of this is around regulated stuff where you need to have that history, right? And you got to go back 4 or 5 years and pull that data. You're pulling it through a handwritten SOQL, asynchronous SOQL against a big object. But this one does have user value with the 50. So this one is one that, you know, yes, we've got the compliance regulation of having the data, but we also, hey, now we can track 50 fields instead of 20.
So we could do the 50 fields in the history up to 24 months?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Einstein Data Detect. This one's evolved over the years. This one has the most current instantiation, the most common use of it is looking at things that are in the wrong place. What do I mean by that? Someone's on a phone call with a customer, they're collecting an SSN. They should put it in the SSN field, but they're moving fast, they got the note open, they just type it into a notes field, right? And then they save the record. Now you have PII in the wrong place where it can be seen by the wrong people. So one of the things, of many, that Data Detect can do is it can run reports such as this one, where it scans your data for profiles that you set up. All right, so I have a very, very, very simple example. But in here, I ran a pattern to look for SSN and you pick the objects, you pick the fields. I picked in the description field if someone put an SSN, and you'll see it found a hit, right? So here's an SSN in a link to the record in plain text in the description field. But you can also get way fancier than simple pattern matching. You can also do like, maybe there's data that you need to have for compliance reasons for certain types of accounts. You can make sure that data is complete, right? You can create patterns like that. Like, are all these fields filled out on these types of accounts? You can also do the reverse, especially with like GDPR and stuff like that. There's a max retention policy, right? You can't retain data past a certain time. I forget what it is. But you can set up a policy saying, do I have data older than this of this type? Right? So these are the types of things you can do with data detect.
Data detect, you showed a SSN being in the notes. What if the notes was being tracked? Can you use?
You can also do it on the field history as well. Yes.
Thank you.
So Datamask. Datamask is not part of Shield, but like I said in the intro, I think it should be. You do all this hard work on production, you're monitoring people, you're blocking exports, you know, you're being super diligent, then you copy all that data down into a sandbox and you give a third-party access, right? And you give them access what? Maybe you're testing an integration, maybe it's an offshore developer building a Lightning component, but you need the data, so you want to give them a partial or full, but you don't need the real data. And what Datamask will let you do is by object and by field, effectively scramble the data. But it's even better than just pure scrambling. It has libraries. So if you've got like the Gates family as in your wealth management company and you have all of their names, all of their emails, all their phone numbers, you don't want that in your partial, but you still need the transactions, the relationships. You need that for testing. So you can go through and say, well, I want to scramble name, I want to scramble address, phone number, email, but you can replace them with credible replacements. They have libraries, like it's a real company name, it's a real first name. So maybe Bill Gates becomes John Doe, and Bill Gates at gates.com goes to, John Doe at johndoe.com. So you can then talk about it and do UAT on it with real names and real descriptions. They're just not real, right? And so that way you can replace it with data, and like I just said, but the big thing is you can do UAT. You can bring users in and say, look at these transactions, look at these records. Does all this look right? Is this testing right? You don't have to fake the data, but you can change the sensitive bits you don't want people to have access to. This one's huge, because no one that I've met pays any attention to what's going on in their sandboxes. And everyone has a partial, many have fulls, right? And so this one is like, when we're talking about sleep at night, this is the biggest one for me, right? Because now I know production's pretty secure. The right people have the right access. We do field level security, all that stuff. Other than exceptions, it's pretty good. This is where I think the most risk is. Okay, so those are the products. This is a bit of an eye chart. I'm not expecting you to read this now, but I know you guys can access a copy. This is a little bit of a, do I need Shield? Do I need all of Shield? What do I need? It's just a little bit of common questions along with products and industries where we see the need. So maybe it'll help you figure out if you need it or should consider it or not. All right, guys, thank you so much.